It was a quiet afternoon in the Carter mansion, one of those houses that looked more like a hotel than a home. Tall glass windows, a perfectly trimmed garden, marble floors that reflected the sun, everything screamed wealth. Yet in the middle of all that beauty, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a woman who had seen the world, sat in silence, her chin resting on her palm, her eyes lost in thought. She wasn't thinking about money. She had plenty of it. She wasn't thinking about clothes or vacations or her many businesses. No, her mind was on her son, Andrew. He was 33, smart, focused, handsome. He had built Carter Holdings into one of the biggest real estate firms in Lagos. Every parent's dream on paper, but not Evelyn's. Not anymore. He had everything except a wife. No wedding bells. No relationship stories. Not even rumors. And it worried her more than anything. Evelyn stood up and walked into his office at the far end of the mansion. "Andrew," she said softly. He looked up from his laptop. "Yes, Mum. We need to talk." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "If it's about marriage again, then what else should I talk about? You're 33, Andrew. 33. I don't want to leave this world not knowing who will carry on our name." Andrew sighed and stood up. "Mum, we've had this talk over and over. I'm not ready for all that." "Not ready or not interested," she snapped, walking toward him. He paused. "I just don't trust it. Every woman I've met knows me as Andrew Carter, the billionaire. I want someone who will love me as a person, not as a bank account." Evelyn studied his face. There was no bitterness, just emptiness. She had heard stories of one or two heartbreaks from his university days, but Andrew rarely spoke of his past. He only worked, traveled, donated to charities, and came home to sleep. He was kind, yes, but emotionally, he was locked up. Later that night, Evelyn sat on her bed, her heart heavy. Maybe she had made a mistake raising him to be too independent. Maybe she had overprotected him. Maybe. And then it hit her. If Andrew couldn't find love naturally, maybe she could find it for him, but in a way no one would expect. The next morning, her driver was shocked when she told him to take a long route through a busy part of Lagos mainland, somewhere far from their high-class neighborhood. She wore an old wrapper, a faded blouse, no jewelry, and a head tie that made her look like someone's forgotten auntie. Her nails were plain, her perfume replaced by the scent of dust and sun. "Mama," her driver whispered, "are you okay?" "I'm fine, Samuel. Just drop me and go." He blinked. "Hey." "Yes, and don't come back until I call you." Before he could ask further, Evelyn stepped out of the car and disappeared into a side street with cracked cement and small shops with rusty roofs. She had chosen this place carefully, a quiet, humble street with friendly but struggling families. No one would recognize her here. She walked past roasted corn sellers, loud bus conductors, and tired-looking women washing clothes in buckets. Her steps were slow, steady, calculated. She finally stopped at an empty corner beside a fenced compound with a blue gate. The wall was cracked, and a neem tree stood nearby offering little shade. This would be her spot, and it didn't take long for her to meet them. The first was Esther. Esther came out of the compound wearing tight jeans and a crop top that left nothing to the imagination. Her wig was long and curly, her nails sharp and painted like tiny flags. She was speaking loudly on the phone. "Babe, I told you NA, if it's not iPhone 15 Pro Max, I'm not collecting. These boys will just be testing you with small things." She paused when she saw Evelyn sitting on the ground. "What's this one doing here?" Esther said loudly, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Madam, carry your poverty elsewhere, I beg. This is not your village." Evelyn said nothing. She simply looked at her, then lowered her gaze. Esther hissed and walked off. Minutes later, another girl came out. She wore a simple gown with slippers. Her hair was neatly parked in a bun, and she held a small plastic bowl of water. She saw Evelyn and stopped. "Auntie, are you okay?" Evelyn nodded, but slowly. "I'm just tired." "Wait here," the girl said and rushed back in. She returned with a small stool. "Sit on this. That ground is too hot." Evelyn looked at her with gentle surprise. "My name is Mary," she said, smiling. "My sister is she's not always like that. Sorry if she was rude." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Thank you, my daughter." Mary nodded, handed her a sachet of water, and sat beside her. And just like that, Mrs. Evelyn Carter's journey had begun, not as a billionaire, but as a quiet, wrinkled old woman named Mama F, sitting by a Lagos fence, watching two sisters who lived under the same roof but carried very different hearts. The days moved slowly on that street, filled with loud bus horns, children's laughter, and the smell of frying oil. But for Mama F, they were days of silent watching and careful listening. She now sat under the same tree every morning, a small mat under her, her hands wrapped around her knees, a thin scarf shielding her from the sun. Nobody suspected she had once dined with governors or traveled to Dubai for weekend meetings. Here, she was just one of the many tired faces trying to survive another Lagos day. And almost every morning, like clockwork, Esther came out first. Sometimes in wigs that didn't sit well, other times in gowns too tight to breathe in. She was loud, always on her phone, always chasing one business deal or the other, or shouting about one boy that ghosted her. Each time she saw Mama F, her mouth twisted in disgust. "See this woman again," she would say loudly. "Are you not tired of sitting here? Don't you have children? You people will just come and be littering up and down." Once, she even kicked Mama F's small nylon bag out of the way. "Clear road, Abeg. You think this is your village square?" But Mama F never responded. She just looked down and waited. Later in the day, Mary would appear. Always simple, a t-shirt or a wrapper, slippers that had seen better days but were clean. She always greeted, always smiled, and sometimes she brought food. One day, she came out with a small nylon containing jollof rice and one egg. "I cooked today, Mama F. The rice might not be much, but I kept this one for you." Mama F stared at the food, eyes slightly moist. "You didn't have to, my daughter." "But I wanted to," Mary said with a small laugh. "You remind me of my late mother sometimes, the way you fold your hands when you're cold." They sat there together, eating slowly, talking about nothing and everything, about how hard it was to find a good job, about how Mary once dreamt of owning a small sewing shop, how she had learned to sew by watching her mother repair their clothes. "What stopped you?" Mama F asked. Mary shrugged. "Life. After she died, and Papa followed 2 years later, everything changed. Esther became the big sister overnight. She promised to take care of me, but I think she lost herself along the way." Mama F nodded. She understood more than she let on. Weeks passed, and the bond between them grew. Mary would sometimes sit under the tree with her after doing chores. She brought water when the sun was harsh. She even once washed Mama F's wrapper when it looked too dusty. Esther didn't hide her disapproval. "One day, that woman will put juju in your food," she snapped. "You just like to carry other people's problem on your head." "She's a human being, Esther," Mary replied calmly. "Kindness won't kill you." "Ene you sabai," Esther hissed and slammed the gate behind her. One morning, as the clouds hung low and the air smelled like incoming rain, Mama F began to cough. "Hard." She clutched her chest and bent forward, breathing heavily. Mary, who had just stepped out to sweep the front of the compound, dropped her broom and ran to her. Mama F. What's wrong? No answer. Just more coughing and weak groans. Mary called out for help, but most people walked past. Some glanced, some muttered God forbid, and kept walking. Esther was inside playing music. Without waiting, Mary ran into the room, came out with her transport money, and waved down a keek. Take us to the small clinic near Iwaya Junction, she told the rider. It wasn't a fancy hospital. The bed creaked, the fan squeaked, but the nurse was gentle. After 2 hours and some mild medication, Mama F was better. She opened her eyes and saw Mary beside her, holding her wrapper like a daughter with her mother's hand. You shouldn't have spent your money, Evelyn whispered. You're the closest thing I have to a mother. Let me do what I can. That night, when Evelyn got home in secret, back into the quiet mansion, she broke down in tears. She had never felt so seen, so touched, not even in her wealthiest days. She knew it was time to call Andrew. The next day, she told him everything. You did what? Andrew asked, half laughing, half confused. I disguised myself as a beggar. I've been living on a poor street for a few weeks now. Mum, I met someone, Andrew, she said softly. A girl named Mary. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know I had money. But she treated me like gold. She fed me with her last kobo. She risked her safety for me. Andrew leaned back. He didn't know what to say. Go and meet her, Evelyn said. But not as Andrew Carter. Let her meet you without the cars and the suits. Just as a friend of mine, someone struggling. See what happens. He shook his head, smiling in disbelief. You're unbelievable. I know, but I'm also your mother, and I love you. Trust me. So the next afternoon, a man in worn jeans, a faded polo shirt, and old sneakers walked slowly into the street. He looked nothing like the sharp-suited billionaire who had been on magazine covers. His name, for now, was David. He walked straight to the neem tree and sat quietly beside Mama F. Mary came out moments later, and her face lit up in surprise. Who's this? She asked. He's a friend from my village, Mama F said, coughing lightly. He just came to check on me. Mary nodded and stretched her hand. I'm Mary. David, he said, shaking her hand gently. That evening, the three of them sat under the tree, talking. Mary told David how she had to drop out of school in her final year, how she sewed clothes with her hands and sold small scarves and hair bands. David listened, carefully, genuinely, and when she offered to share her fried yam with him, even though she barely had enough for herself, something in Andrew's heart shifted. He had seen wealth. He had seen beauty. But he had never seen this. Andrew returned to that street every afternoon for the next 2 weeks. Not as a billionaire. Not as the CEO of Carter Holdings. Just as David, a quiet man who sat under a neem tree beside an old woman and laughed over puff-puff and stories about life. He listened as Mary spoke about her dreams, the small fashion school she wanted to start, the children's clothes she loved to design in her spare time, the pain of losing her parents and the weight of living with a sister who didn't understand her heart. He never interrupted. He asked questions. He laughed when she laughed. He offered nothing, promised nothing. Yet he gave her something she had never received from anyone. Time, attention, presence, and slowly, Mary began to open up in ways she never had with anyone. One evening, as they walked to the roadside to buy roasted corn, she turned to him and said, David, do you ever feel like the world moves too fast and you're just trying to catch your breath? Andrew looked at her. All the time. They shared the corn in silence, but the silence was warm. That night, as Andrew sat in his real mansion, his heart wasn't in the chandelier lights or the art on the wall. It was somewhere far away, on that street with peeling paint, next to a girl who had never asked him for anything but always gave him everything. He was falling for her, and he knew it. But with that love came a weight. He couldn't keep pretending forever. He had to tell her. Tell her he wasn't poor. Tell her his name wasn't David. Tell her Mama F was his mother. Tell her he had been testing her without her knowledge. But what if she walked away? What if she saw it as a cruel trick? He sat with his mother, his head in his hands. Mum, I don't know how to tell her. I don't want to lose her. Evelyn touched his shoulder. Then tell her with honesty, not with pride, not as Andrew the billionaire, but as the man who sat beside her and shared her meal with his bare hands. Andrew nodded. Soon. I just need a little more time. But time, as always, had its own plans. It started when Esther noticed Mary smiling too often. Why are you always cheerful these days? She asked one morning while fixing her eyelashes in front of a cracked mirror. Did someone dash you money? Mary chuckled. No, just enjoying life, I guess. Esther narrowed her eyes. Or is it that beggar's so-called friend? That David boy? Mary didn't answer. Esther smirked. Don't be foolish, Mary. These men that look poor are often the worst. You think he'll marry you with his dusty sneakers and faded jeans. But that night, curiosity got the better of her. She followed from a distance when she saw Mary leaving the compound to meet David. She watched as they sat under the tree laughing softly, sharing something wrapped in paper. Saw David gently help Mary adjust her wrapper when the wind blew. Saw how close they had become. And for a moment, jealousy flared in her chest. The next day, while running an errand near Ikeja, Esther walked past a billboard. Her eyes froze. It was a photo of Andrew Carter. The same face, the same eyes, but now in a designer suit, smiling beside the governor at a real estate event. She blinked. What? She took out her phone and searched the name, Andrew Carter, CEO Carter Holdings. The result shocked her. It was David, or at least the man she thought was David. Esther's lips curled into a smile. The kind of smile people wear when they know something no one else does. That evening, she wore her best dress, applied thick makeup, straightened her wig, and took a bold step she hadn't made in years. She walked straight into the Carter Holdings headquarters. When the receptionist stopped her, she smiled and said confidently, Tell Mr. Andrew Carter his old friend Esther is here to see him. It took a while, but Andrew agreed to see her out of curiosity. When she walked into his office, his expression didn't change. Esther, right. She giggled. Ah, so you remember me. He nodded slowly. From the street. My mother told me about you. I didn't know you were the Andrew Carter, she said, sitting without being offered a seat. You really hid well, but I must say, I like surprises. Andrew raised an eyebrow. And what exactly do you want? She smiled. Look, let me be honest. I didn't treat your mother well, but that's in the past. Let's talk about the present. You and I both know you deserve someone who matches your level. Someone confident. Someone like me. Andrew didn't flinch. Mary doesn't know who I am yet. And you think telling her will scare her away? No, Esther said smoothly. I think you can do better. Andrew leaned forward. Thank you for your honesty, Esther. She smiled again, thinking she had won. But she didn't know she had walked into a test. Later that week, Andrew invited both Esther and Mary to a small family dinner at a quiet restaurant. He asked his mother to host it and let them think it was just a thank you dinner for helping Mama F. Mary wore her best ankara, simple but neat. Esther wore something loud, shiny, and unnecessarily short. Evelyn smiled and welcomed them both. Then she stood and said, Before we eat, I want to tell the truth. She pulled off the scarf, removed the wrapper, and suddenly Mama F was gone. In her place stood Mrs. Evelyn Carter, elegant and graceful. Mary's eyes widened. Her hand trembled. Esther's mouth dropped. "And this," Evelyn continued, "is my son. Andrew, not David." Andrew stood beside his mother, calm and composed. Esther recovered first. "Auntie, wow, so you were testing us?" "And then, me, I knew something was off, but I still treated you well. You can ask her." "You told me I was polluting your gate," Evelyn said calmly. Esther froze. Andrew looked at Mary. She was silent. He stepped closer. "Mary, I didn't mean to deceive you. I only wanted to know if someone could love me for me." Mary didn't say a word. Her eyes held too many emotions: shock, pain, confusion, betrayal. She looked at Evelyn, then at Andrew. Then, without a word, she picked up her bag and walked out of the restaurant. Andrew didn't follow. He knew he had to let her breathe. Evelyn placed her hand on his shoulder. "She just needs time." But the silence that followed made them all wonder. Had he lost the only real love he ever found? Mary didn't cry that night. She just walked home with her slippers dragging against the dusty road. The evening breeze brushed against her cheeks, but she didn't notice. Her thoughts were louder than the Okadas rushing past her. She wasn't angry, not exactly. She was just lost. She had opened her heart, piece by piece, to someone who wasn't who he said he was. All the conversations, all the laughter, the shared corn, the casual walks. Were they real? When she reached her compound, Esther was already there, lying on the bed with a face full of makeup and a fan blowing directly at her. "Did you hear how they embarrassed me?" Esther said without looking up. "That Evelyn woman thinks she's wise. But CN, rich people are not better than us." Mary didn't answer. She changed into her night wrapper quietly, folded her gown, and lay down beside the wall with her face turned away. Sleep didn't come easily. The next few days were quiet. She didn't go near the neem tree. She avoided the corner where Mama F one Saturday. She didn't tell anyone what had happened, not even her friend Chica from church. She just went about her small chores and tried to push David out of her mind. But she couldn't. One morning, as she came outside to sweep, she saw a small nylon bag by the doorstep. Inside was a groundnut wrap, exactly the same as the one they used to share under the tree. A note was tucked beside it. "You made groundnut taste better. D." She held the note for a long time before placing it in the back of her Bible. The next day, a second bag came. This time, it was a small piece of roasted yam, neatly wrapped in brown paper, and another note. "I never liked roasted yam until I sat with you." Again, no name, just D. The third gift came quietly 2 days later. It was a wrapper, faded but clean, just like the one Mama F wore. Inside was a handwritten note, a little smudged with what looked like nervous hands. "I miss being seen without needing to impress. I miss being your friend. D." Mary sat on her bed that night and stared at the wrapper for a long time. She smiled a little, just a little, but folded the wrapper and placed it gently under her pillow. Still, she didn't respond. Until one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. A soft, uncertain knock. When she opened it, Mrs. Evelyn stood there, not as the rich woman from the restaurant, but as Mama F. Her hair was in simple plaits. She wore a wrapper and rubber slippers. No earrings, no perfume, just a black handbag in her hand and a tired, humble look on her face. Mary stared. "Auntie, can I come in?" Evelyn asked. Mary stepped aside. The room was small, barely enough space for 2 chairs and a narrow bed. But Evelyn sat gently, like she'd done it 1,000 times. "I didn't come to speak for Andrew," she said. "I came to speak for myself." Mary said nothing. "I was wrong. Evelyn continued. Not because I pretended to be poor. I did that for my son. But because I became your friend under false circumstances. And still, you treated me better than I deserved. Mary sat on the bed, arms folded, eyes soft but guarded. I want you to know something, Evelyn said, looking up. You didn't fail any test. You didn't pass anything. You just showed me the kind of person you've always been. That was enough. More than enough. Silence. Then Evelyn smiled faintly. You once told me your dream was to open a sewing shop. Not a big one, just something small where you could teach young girls and make clothes for children. Mary nodded slowly. Evelyn opened her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She placed it gently on the table. I rented a small space on a quiet street. Nothing fancy. Just 4 walls, a clean floor, and a good window. If you ever decide you're ready to use it, it's yours. Mary didn't touch the paper. She didn't cry. She didn't jump. She just whispered, Why are you doing all this? Evelyn's voice was quiet. Because even when you thought I had nothing, you gave me more than people ever have. Mary looked at her hands. I was just being human. And that, Evelyn said, standing, is what the world needs more of. Before she left, she held Mary's hand for a brief moment. He's still the same person who walked with you under the rain. Same man who wiped groundnut from your chin and said nothing. His name was never David, but the heart was real. Mary didn't speak, but as the door closed behind Evelyn, she stared at the folded paper on the table. Then she smiled softly and placed it beside the wrapper under her pillow. She still didn't call Andrew, but something inside her had shifted. Not all broken things are meant to stay broken. The first time Mary returned to Evelyn's house, she didn't knock. She just stood by the gate, staring at the compound she had only seen once from the inside. The gardener glanced up and was about to speak when the front door opened. Evelyn was already waiting. No fancy clothes, no security escort, just a white wrapper and a soft smile. I was hoping you'd come, she said. Mary nodded. I didn't come for anything. I just miss sitting with you, the way we used to. You know, under the neem tree. Evelyn smiled. Come in. I made fried jam. The roadside one was better, but I tried. They both laughed, softly, naturally, like old friends finding each other again. From that day on, Mary came once a week. She never asked for Andrew. She came to sit with Evelyn in the back garden, sip zobo from clay cups, and talk about things that had nothing to do with money, just life, hopes, and the little joys of an ordinary day. Sometimes Evelyn would mention Andrew casually. He asked about you, she would say. Mary would nod, then change the topic. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was just caution. Until one evening, after the rain had stopped and the air smelled of wet leaves, Andrew appeared in the garden while Mary was packing up to leave. She didn't freeze. She didn't walk away. She just looked at him. He looked different. No suit, no driver waiting, no assistant. Just a plain shirt, brown sandals, and a quietness she remembered from their walks. Hi, he said. Hi. Still like groundnut? He asked. She chuckled. Still can't finish a rap on my own. They Saturday talked, not about the past, not about the lie, not even about love, just about friendship, about the little things they missed, about the woman who brought them together. I still think about that day you offered to share your fried yam with me, Andrew said. Mary nodded. I didn't think it would lead here. He looked at her carefully. I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to pretend. I still feel what I felt under that tree, even more now. Mary was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I never hated you. I just didn't know where the pretending ended and the real part began. This is the real part, he said. All of it. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and whispered, then I'll stay. But don't treat me like a stranger in your world. He reached for her hand, not quickly, not dramatically, just gently. We'll grow into it together. Over the next few months, things didn't change all at once. Mary still lived in her old house for a while. She still made her own breakfast, still wore her slippers, still carried her market bag with pride. But gradually, her world stretched. Andrew didn't try to force her into his lifestyle. Instead, he created a space for her inside it. He asked her how she'd want to run a fashion school, what colors she'd use, how she'd design the work tables, what kind of girls she'd want to teach. He never called it a gift. Never once said, I bought this for you. Instead, he said, let's build it together. And they did. She named it Thread and Grace. He attended the opening quietly, watching as she gave her first sewing lesson to 5 excited teenage girls. Evelyn stood proudly beside him, wearing one of the wrappers Mary had picked for her. Their wedding came a few months later. It was small, just 40 people. Held in Evelyn's private garden with white chairs, soft music, and the smell of fresh roses in the air. Mary wore a dress she designed herself, simple, flowing, with hand-sewn beads around the collar. Her veil was short. Her smile was long. Andrew wore a sky-blue kaftan. No tuxedo, no bow tie, just tradition and peace. Evelyn gave a short speech that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. I found a daughter when I wasn't looking, she said. And in doing so, I gave my son a chance at real love. Far away, in a crowded room with a broken fan and noisy neighbors, Esther scrolled through her phone. She paused at a photo, Mary standing under a tree of white blossoms, holding hands with Andrew, smiling, glowing. No hashtags, no press, no flashy celebration, just joy, real joy. Esther zoomed in on the photo, then slowly dropped her phone on the bed and whispered to no one in particular. It should have been me. But by then, the world had moved on. And somewhere, under a familiar neem tree that now grew quietly in the corner of Mary and Andrew's new home, 2 chairs sat side by side, always waiting for 2 old friends to sit and share groundnut again. This story teaches us that kindness is a currency that always returns with interest. We often judge people by how they look or what they seem to have, but true character is revealed in how we treat those who have nothing to offer us. Mary didn't know Mama F was a billionaire in disguise. She simply acted from a place of love, humility, and sincerity. In the end, it wasn't beauty, status, or money that changed her life. It was her heart. Therefore, be kind, even when no one is watching. You never know whose life you're touching or who's watching yours. If this touched your heart, made you smile, or reminded you of the power of kindness, then you've only just begun the journey. We have more real, relatable, and unforgettable stories coming your way, filled with twists, deep emotions, and life-changing lessons. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next powerful story drops.
Thank you for watching Story Lovers. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notification bell so you can get notified whenever we drop new stories.